Hello and welcome to Week 7 of Intersessions. My name is Katie Hamilton and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Orientation Programs. You may have heard my voice before on our weekly mini Flock Talk episodes. Today, you'll be introduced to a variety of campus partners and organizations that focus on the value of shared community. Before this, you might have heard from the UO Common Reading team and their exciting news that the Common Reading book is now a podcast. Check out their Intersession on our YouTube channel if you missed it this morning. This next session will give you an understanding of how global connection is possible during this pandemic. Global Education Oregon, or GEO for short, offers more than 150 academic programs and internships in over 40 countries that thrill, challenge, and inform. Whether you want to study sustainably in a modern capital, explore the urban landscape of an ancient city, or enhance your cross-cultural development, there are plenty of options for all students. Now, before we get started, students, please remember to use the Q&A function in your Zoom screen, to share your questions. We'll be able to answer them live towards the end of the program. For our parents and family members watching on the Parent and Family Facebook page, our staff, including those from the Global Education Oregon program, will also be in the live chat. So I'm joined by Kayla Groshstein, Institutional Research Specialist for the Division of Global Engagement, who will be talking about GEO today. And I already mispronounced her last name. I'm so sorry about that. Hi, Kayla. Take it away.
A little bit of a snapshot. So I'm the Institutional Relations Specialist for Global Education Oregon, or what we call GEO for short, Study Abroad, you'll hear commonly as well. I use the she, her pronouns. I was a first-generation college student from St. Petersburg, Florida, so I'm not originally an Oregonian, but I am now. And I think that's just always sometimes helpful to kind of see. You never know where life is going to take you. Some of my international experience from undergrad, I did a multi-location program, so sometimes you don't have to be bound down to a particular location. So I went on a short-term program in London, Paris, and Rome, so I had a week long in each location, and we did different excursions and cultural immersion experience as well as advancing our language skills. So just to give you a highlight as to some experiences that I've even encountered. In terms of the Division of Global Engagement, we offer a lot of support services not only for students to study abroad, but we also offer other programming and support for international student and scholar services. And so you'll kind of hear in translation either GEO or the Division of Global Engagement. I just want to highlight that those are all kind of sisters to each other. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a glimpse of some study abroad students' experiences. And thank you again for our GEO student reporters.
One, two, three, four, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great. 9, gonna shine, life is good. I'm doing fine. 10, gonna do it right and do it again, yeah. I look into the sky with all the beautiful color, but there's more than just for me, so gonna share it with another. I got to show, to give, let out. I want to sing and shout. Take a look and see a beautiful morning that turns into a beautiful evening, and together make a beautiful life. And if you wanna see, then come along with me, that's right. And if you want a good tomorrow, it's pretty simple, gotta find a light to follow. And if you do, you have a future real bright. And it's a combination of consistency. Come on, sing oh, 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 oh. Come on, come on, come on and sing, yeah. Come on, come on, come on and sing. Oh, 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 oh. Come on, come on, come on and sing, yeah. Come on, come on, come on and sing. With another sunrise, it's a brand new day, so gonna make a little list to keep the words away. I gotta dance just a little bit, move to be free. Keep my head up, don't forget to be me. Like I won $1 million, like I hit the pay dirt. Gonna smile from ear to ear, the kind that makes your face hurt. And we'll laugh, jump, sing loud, not afraid to shout about being happy, living it out. Take a look and see a beautiful morning that turns into a beautiful evening, and together make a beautiful life. And if you wanna see, then come along with me, that's right. And if you want a good tomorrow, it's pretty simple, gotta find a light to follow. And if you do, you have a future real bright. And it's a combination of consistency. Come on and sing oh, 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 oh.
Great. So I hope that gives you a little taste as to some of the experiences that our students at the U of O campus have had an opportunity to experience as well in multiple locations around the world. So just to give you a little bit of a taste. So today we're going to do a little overview. We're going to talk about the statistics at the University of Oregon, some changes that have happened due to the COVID pandemic, as well as some benefits of studying abroad, why it's a value for your educational experience at the University of Oregon. Different types of programs available to students, which I think is really helpful. So I gave an example of some short-term programs as well as multi-location programs. So there's a highlight of how you can kind of pick and choose the program that's right for you. How to make it happen, so what you need to do, what are the steps, who's eligible and when can you study abroad, how long does it take to navigate, and how to stay connected with our office in the future once you arrive on campus. So just a little snapshot of study abroad at the University of Oregon. So in the 2018-2019 years, we do calculate a little bit behind. So the summer is considered the end of our cycle for counting the amount of students that have studied abroad. So they're still working out the details, especially given the COVID situation that started in March. Some of the changes that are happening for the 2019-2020 student numbers. Last year we were at around 1,200, close to 1,300 students that have studied abroad. This last 2018-19 year, we had a little over 1,100. That is pretty common. Anywhere between 1,100 to 1,400 students study abroad every year at the University of Oregon, so you won't be alone if this is something that you're interested in doing. Given that calculation, we have roughly around 25% of the student body, based on their graduation, have had an international experience or an international internship. That can be multiple times, so some students can go more than once if you are able to plan ahead and put it in your schedule. Make it a priority for you. That's just something to keep in mind in the future. So again, you won't be alone. It's just something to help set you off from your other colleagues and your peers at the University of Oregon. Like Katie said at the beginning, we have over 150 programs currently on the books in over 40 countries. For some folks that have either family members that have gone to the University of Oregon before, that number might look a little different than it did in the past. This is one of those situations that have been adapted based on the COVID pandemic. Based on, we want to make sure that students are safe where they're going and that the location abroad is managed appropriately for you to be safe and healthy in that particular location. Whether it's a pandemic, national disaster, or so on, we want to make sure that students are safe. If within 150 programs, we have roughly around 30 plus international internship opportunities. That can be part-time, where you're working 10 to 20 hours a week in addition to doing academic work or programs, or you can do a full-time Global Works internship where you're working 40 hours a week in a particular location. They do offer virtual internships currently where you're still building global connections in another country, which can be really helpful in terms of solidifying a job if you do a really good job. Sometimes people have been able to land remote positions before graduation and even be able to work full-time after. So again, it's all up to you as to the internship process in terms of those placements. You do have to interview for those positions. I just always want to make sure that that's very well known. It's competitive, so it's not always guaranteed that you're going to get something, but we will help you and guide you in terms of making sure that you have the most success available to you. Then on the right-hand side, we have just a couple of ideas just so you can kind of see at the University of Oregon what are the most common students' majors and or minors on occasion that are studying abroad at the University of Oregon. Business students, and that is business, marketing, and finance, all of the above, which is why there's an asterisk next to that degree area. All of the business majors go abroad very commonly, so that's the number one. International studies, there is a requirement at the University of Oregon to study abroad at least for 10 weeks in another country to get that international experience based on region or area of discipline. So it's just something to also consider. Journalism, again, there's an asterisk because it also means journalism, PR, media studies, and advertising. So just being, again, mindful of all of the areas of focus in those locations for the School of Journalism and Communications. The other top majors, political science, Spanish, psychology, human physiology, and architecture, I think are always really helpful to kind of adapt and engage what's the most common majors on campus that study abroad. That does not mean if your major or something that you're interested in that's not listed on here is not supported from study abroad. It just means that there's not as many students on that particular degree area. But we can still support you and find other opportunities for you to engage in that way. Some highlighted programs, again, just give you a taste as to some of the experiences that we have available for University of Oregon students. So we have Neotropical Ecology, which gives a little of the science, technology, and mathematics area focus. We have Psychology in London with an internship. So again, those combination programs where you do your academics and an internship location. We have multiple studies within like the South Pacific, the African diaspora studies in New Orleans and Ghana. So we work with a historical Black college and university in New Orleans, where you do some of your work there, and then you actually go to Ghana in particular, and you visit the Elmira Castle, which was one of the largest slave castles in Ghana, which had the most slave transaction throughout the world, came through that particular castle in Ghana. Another program that I think is always really helpful is the cross-border interviewing and story development in Spain and Portugal. I just ran out of room there. So it's a multi-location program where you're doing majority of your program in Spain, but you have some portion of your program that's actually in Portugal. So again, just to highlight some different types of options that are available for UVO students. So moving on, this is one of those the common questions that I get asked on a regular basis, especially at the beginning, is where are University of Oregon students going in the world? So these are the top 10 destinations that we currently have listed from the 2018-2019 year. It's very comparable to the university or the United States for students that are studying abroad across the U.S. Are common for Spain, United Kingdom, Italy, and France are very common in those top locations. We also have a huge partnership with Japan, so you'll see a lot of programs in those particular locations as well. This is just to give you a snapshot, little visual representation with the map to kind of give you an idea based on the percentages of students that are going in those locations, so you can kind of see the number and the country locations as well. So some of the benefits of studying abroad obviously is going to be creating a global awareness and being able to contribute that back into your studies at the University of Oregon. So you'll have that experience and you'll still be able to incorporate that back in the U.S. This can also open up additional doors about how do you communicate with other individuals in other locations. A big component of that, for instance, is the professional way that you distribute a business card can be very particular in certain countries. The way if you bow, if you have to shake a hand, or what kind of eye contact should you be doing is very different in comparison to the United States. So I think that's just really important to acknowledge, and a way that you can experience that abroad, especially if you have any kind of aspirations to get a professional position internationally or work in a United States company that works with global partners. It's something that can be really helpful. Enriching your academic learning is always something that's really helpful for study abroad because it can advance or enhance what you're learning at the University of Oregon. So it can sometimes be similar classes that you would take at the University of Oregon with an international context based on where you are at. So the location in which you are studying can also be incorporated in that. Or it can also allow you to take courses that are not, unfortunately, available at the University of Oregon and enhance what your academic experience would have been by different elective options that you could have taken for your major or your minor, or even general education credits. So I think that's just something to be mindful of in terms of what a study abroad experience can bring to you. You develop leadership skills, which I think is something that's really helpful. It kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with the personal growth and independence. A lot of times, even if you've had travel experience with your family members or even some friends on occasion, sometimes you don't realize how much and how supportive those family members have been in your travel experience. And a lot of times this is the first time a student has traveled on their own, gone through security at the airport by themselves, had to endure what that looks like if your plane is delayed or late, or if you miss a flight or bus or train or so on in terms of getting to where you need to go. That takes a lot of critical thinking, a lot of adaptability skills, problem solving, thinking on your feet. A lot of times you're in different time zones, you're probably exhausted. I'm sure I know that I've been there a few times where you're not completely thinking straight, but you still need to figure out what you need to do and where you need to get to. So that can be really helpful in terms of having that experience as well. Same with when you're traveling to other countries and you may have some language experience. So for instance, for me, I said that I went to London, Paris, and Rome. I had taken 4 years of French previously in my college and high school experience. When I went to France, I thought I was going to be so confident and I was going to know how to communicate to everyone there, and I didn't know barely anything. So, it's a really great opportunity for you to enhance your language learning experience as well as pushing yourself out there, because culturally it's always really helpful, not only from the language skills, but also body language and how you communicate to other people. Italians are very gesty, so you're just really wanting to make sure that you're following along and being able to communicate effectively to individuals or locals in that particular location. Advancing career opportunities, again, not even just if you have an internship experience. Obviously that can kind of connect and give you more professional experiences, which I think is really helpful. But also in the academics, really utilizing the guest speakers that come to your classes or the lecturers or the faculty members in those international locations. Those are really build you a lot of connections. It can solidify opportunities or jobs or even internship opportunities, field work, research in the future if you ever go for a master's or a PhD. I think that's always really helpful in terms of advancing your career opportunities globally. And you never know where people are going to end up, similar to how I've been in Florida and how I'm now in Oregon. You just never know where the people in your network are going to be. And so this is a really great opportunity for you just to broaden your network of people that you are aware of. And the best time to go is now. As a student, you have so many access and resources available to you if you are interested in studying abroad. I came from a single parent household. I was a low income student. Again, first generation. I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I never thought studying abroad or going international was an opportunity for me. But that's not actually always the case. If you want to study abroad or if you want to travel, this is a great opportunity to do it as an undergraduate student because you have financial resources available to you. Most forms, not all, but most forms of financial aid and scholarships at the University of Oregon can apply to a study abroad international experience. And so again, those can help you navigate some of those financial barriers and those financial costs in terms of making study abroad a reality. So we're going to, usually I like to have students with me. We don't have that case right now. So this next video here is going to showcase some diverse students and their experiences and their exposure that they've had from their study abroad experiences and international internships.
My name is Helen Tonso.
My name is Rachel Benner.
Jose Amezquita.
Drew Donahue.
Ava Jamerson. I am Chinese American.
I am Native American.
I am an African American student.
I am a gay woman.
I am Mexican American.
I am a first-generation college student, and I studied abroad in Ecuador.
And I studied abroad in London.
I interned abroad in Shenzhen, China.
I think studying abroad has put this sort of tick in my mind to always remember to look outside the bubble of the United States.
When we would go to a store to just get some food or something, and as soon as we walked in, they would switch the music to English music. Just because of us, we were the only ones that were different that were there. You stick out, but I mean, it wasn't necessarily a horrible thing or anything like that.
It made me feel like I was an outcast. It made me feel like I didn't belong. I didn't belong there. But I knew that those were one of the barriers I had to face.
I was an intern at Oracle Advertising, and my boss, he's a part of a tribe, he's a chief. And so I had some interesting connections. I thought that was pretty cool just to be able to tell them oh no, it's I'm a part of a tribe, just kind of like you guys have tribes here and stuff.
I don't know exactly where my family is from. I know it's somewhere in Africa, but it kind of makes me curious now to find out exactly where my ancestors are from.
Every country has stereotypes about others, but the key is just to try and get to see their side of the story and see their perspective. And then when you do, you have to completely reevaluate what you've thought.
Nothing that I do is just this single truth. I think if anything, my study abroad experiences have pushed me to remember that and to be really fluid in the way I understand the world and talk about it.
All right. right, thanks so much for listening to these individual student stories and their experiences. I think it's really helpful to acknowledge especially a heritage finding aspect that I think is really important. A lot of students, I would say close to 1/3 of the students that study abroad, not only at the University of Oregon, but in the United States, are doing it to find connections to their ancestry. The Ancestry.com and the 23andMe and the whole DNA concept that I think is really popular has really kind of advanced that to give you some kind of connection locally of where you might have originated or came from. And so this is a really good opportunity to kind of explore and adapt your differences or even your family connections, or even visit some family members that maybe you've never met before that live in other countries. Again, these are all really great opportunities as to experience that. I think another piece within studying abroad in particular that I think is really helpful is really focusing on your own personal identity and whether that's challenged or affirmed in other countries in comparison to the United States. Again, that cross-cultural communication and that cross-cultural development and sensitivity I think is really important within study abroad, because it allows you an opportunity to explore yourself and figure out what you're interested in. A lot of students actually can either change majors or find something that they're really passionate in, or decide if they were either undecided or exploring majors, that they have an opportunity to select a major based on what they were passionate about or explored while they were on their study abroad experience. So you don't have to feel limited on some of these programs, which I think is really helpful in terms of that too. So in terms of the program types that are available for University of Oregon students, this looks like a lot, and so we're just going to kind of highlight some key elements of this. You can always watch the video back and kind of reiterate in this section, because I think it's a lot of information, and you can always come and talk to one of our advisors in our office and find out more information if you're not sure how a program particularly fits or if it meets your needs. So we have GEO Center programs that are available. So we have 4 main centers in Europe, essentially is where our main hub is. So we have 2 in Spain, 1 in Segovia, which is just about a 30-minute train ride north of Madrid. And then we also have 1 in the Asturias district in Oviedo. As 2 particular locations. A lot of them are going to be Spanish language programs, but there are additional programs that are available in those locations as well, like the cross-border interviewing and story development, as I talked about previously. The other centers that we have is London, United Kingdom. So we have a plethora of options of programs that are available in that location. And then we also have Siena, Italy as our next hub that we have many programs available for students as well. The cool part about a GEO Center program is if you are a student that has never traveled abroad before and you're just a little nervous or don't really know how to explore or find great transportation, making sure that you're not getting in independent cabs or so on and so forth. It can be really helpful because we have full-time staff and site directors at those particular centers and locations. All of your program materials are built into the package price of those as well. And there's typically excursions that are available for students that either are optional or majority of them will be incorporated within your actual curriculum and programs. A lot of times those excursions are things that you might already want to do, say going to like the British Museum or so on and so forth. It can be really helpful in terms of doing that as well. And it can also help you find local or free things to do in the area, which I think can be, again, really helpful as a student on a budget, trying to make sure that you're enhancing your experience while you're abroad. University of Oregon faculty-led programs are kind of in the nature of the name. So it's a University of Oregon faculty member, so it is completely embedded within your academic program in the University of Oregon's campus system. And so a lot of times you can get anywhere, if it's a summer program, you can get anywhere between 6 usually to up to sometimes about 12 to 18 quarter credits on a particular faculty-led program. The other reason why this is super helpful is because you will get to know your faculty member. You will be traveling with them. You will be getting to know them every single day. You'll know a little bit about their personal life, and they will remember you, which can be really great for recommendations in the future for jobs. If you're eventually plan to go into a master's program, or even if you don't know if that's something you're interested in, again, it's really helpful to make that really personal connection with a faculty member. So again, those are some highlights in those particular locations. A lot of our faculty-led programs can be at our centers, or supported at a center, but they don't always exist in those particular locations. So sometimes we'll have different locations either in those same countries or other areas as well. Exchange programs are typically that direct relation, or where you're enrolling as an international student at another university that we have a partnership with the University of Oregon. So an example of that we send a lot of students to is Waseda University in Japan, in Tokyo. So we send quite a few students there to advance their Japanese language skills, or you can also take additional courses on that particular program. The thing that's interesting with exchanges is they can sometimes be competitive depending on the amount of slots or student seats that we have available on those particular universities. The reason why that's helpful and that can be financially affordable is because you're still paying University of Oregon tuition for your particular program, and you're basically swapping places with an international student from that particular university. So when we have students going to Waseda University, for instance, we will have students coming to campus at the University of Oregon from Waseda as well. So again, that relationship building. It's also a really helpful way for you to make connections with international students on campus before you depart for your country, or your study abroad program can be really helpful. Again, making friends or establishing relationships can be really a good opportunity for you to feel like you have somebody in that particular location prior to you arriving, can be really helpful. Language and culture programs are kind of in the nature of the game. So you're typically doing that particular language as a whole. So if you are doing Spanish, for instance, there might be programs that are available for you to have an entry-level Spanish experience, so there might be a requirement, but there's not always a requirement for certain languages as well. So you can still come in, if you've never taken basically a French class, you can still take a whole program where you're only doing French. This can be really helpful for students that are studying a Bachelor of Science. Any program that's considered a Bachelor of Science requires you to have 2 years of language experience at the college level. The cool part about this is that you can take basically 1 quarter, or even in the summer, intensive language program where you're, again, only doing the structure, writing, and verbal communication of that particular language, which can be really helpful for you to get basically around 18 credits of language study, which is a year's worth of language, in 1 quarter, which opens up additional quarters for you to take other classes, other electives on campus. So again, it doesn't have to set you back in terms of having a study abroad experience. It can actually leverage you to be able to take on a minor, take on another major sometimes, in terms of still graduating on time or even early. So again, having some of those connections and prioritizing study abroad can be really helpful. For field studies and research, sometimes they are supported by a particular faculty member, or they can be individually focused, but you will still need to have support from a faculty member in order to ensure that you get credit. So this could be supporting a research project that a faculty member on campus is doing, or creating your own, especially if you're in the Clark Honors College, for instance, and you're going after a thesis. This can be really helpful for you to get additional field and research experience based on what you might be already doing at the University of Oregon. Internships, I won't go into too much details because we've already kind of touched upon that. Again, there's part-time internships and then there's full-time internships, so you'll kind of see those as well. For third-party providers, it's a common term that we use in the international education industry. Essentially what that means, similar to exchanges, how we have partnerships with other universities and other countries, we have partnerships with other educational providers that provide programs in locations or areas of discipline that we currently don't cover in the other aforementioned types of programs. So I think that can be really helpful. A lot of times what you'll see is like an acronym. So we love acronyms in higher education. I'm sure you can attest to this. So one, for instance, as an example, is DIS, is a common study abroad third-party provider that we utilize. So it stands for the Danish Institute of Study Abroad in Scandinavia. We have many students that are studying within architecture or product design that go on those types of programs that are, again, different options available for students to get different experience as well. So there are other providers that are available for students to get experience, educational programs, or so on these types of programs. But again, this is just something to highlight. The reason it's important to kind of see what you want or what's available to you is really knowing yourself, asking yourself the questions that are, what type of experience are you looking for? What location are you wanting? Do you want a program that's all built in where excursions and your weekends are going to be really prioritized? Or do you want a little bit more independence where there's not somebody kind of showing you around because you maybe are more traveled or more experienced in that area, and you want to really flourish in that kind of concept. So there's different types of options available for every student, depending on what you're interested in. And again, we can help navigate some of those questions for you. If you're not finding something that you're interested in, we can try to work with you about what options might be available that might fit your needs. So investing in your future, another common question that I get asked on a regular basis is, how much is this really going to cost me for study abroad? And it's so hard to give a direct answer because there's so many variables in place. A big piece of that is program costs can range based on the location, where you're going, how long you're going to be there, what is the currency translation from the United States dollar, how strong is it in that location, does it have built-in excursions, does it have the materials built into that particular program, and so on. Obviously, you're not going to want to spend a year-long or an academic year-long program cost when you're only going for a couple of weeks in the summer. So again, there's variables in terms of the cost translation for having a study abroad experience. So again, it can range. Some summer programs that we've had grants also supporting particular programs as well. So I've seen anywhere as low as basically like $4,000 for a 4-week program in the summer, all the way up to sometimes 12 to, I think the most expensive is close to like $20,000 for a quarter-long program or even a semester. So those are just some things to think about in terms of the translation of credits, cost. Is it worthwhile for you? What's the return on investment in your case in particular? And so that's just something to think about. For all of our programs on our website, so you can get there easily from geo.uoregon.edu. And all of our programs, once you search on our program page, if you click on a particular program on the right-hand side, or if you're on a mobile device or an iPad, it'll typically be in the bottom. You can click on a PDF printed out version of a budget for that particular program, which will tell you all of what's included in that cost. It'll also give you a guided estimate of additional expenses that are not included in your program costs. So for an example, any of our programs do not include the flight to and from country because we are not sure if Eugene is the right airport for you in terms of traveling or so on for that particular program, especially if it's in the summer or fall, for instance, when you're coming back from summer. You might be, more accustomed to either going to Seattle or Portland or San Francisco or so on and so forth. So again, making sure that you're available and have that access to find flights. So we give you a guide as to what we anticipate flights to be, but again, you can always find more discounted rates and so on. There's also, for flights in particular, there's also other providers that support students, undergraduate students in particular, to help with flight costs. So for instance, there's Student Universe and there's also STA Travel, allows you to basically put a deposit on a plane ticket. So you can basically put down close to like $300 and then pay in monthly payments for your flight, rather than spending sometimes up to $1,100 for an international flight in particular all up front. You can do a deposit and a payment plan up until the point of departure. So again, that can be really helpful for a student that's on a budget as an opportunity to exist for that as well. Another cost that's not included in program costs is if you don't already have a passport. We just encourage you to make sure that you do. We do have a passport center on campus in the EMU, or the Herb Memorial Union. So again, just some things to think about in terms of access points for study abroad or being able to make it happen. For students in particular, the other common question I get on a regular basis is, do I pay University of Oregon tuition and a study abroad fee? At the University of Oregon, you do not. Every university system will operate or charge study abroad fees a little bit differently, so it really just depends on that office. For us, we do not pay University of Oregon tuition or the fees, which I think is really helpful. So like the student rec fee, the tech fee, all those additional fees that can kind of encompass each quarter's budget at the University of Oregon. You only pay the program cost of that study abroad program. It gets billed directly to your DuckWeb account that you would have access to already, even if you were just taking courses at the University of Oregon. So just something to keep in mind in terms of cost benefits as well. The other piece that I'm just going to highlight briefly is the difference between semester and quarter credits. I think that's always really helpful. Obviously, the University of Oregon's on a quarter system, and some international programs are on a semester system, or even their cycle might be still a little different than ours. So for instance, some programs in Japan, or even Korea on occasion, can be starting up until like late October, early November, and go until February. So again, we'll work out with you to make sure that that's still, you're getting enough credits to cover those 2 quarters in terms of making sure that you're still on track for graduation. So just some things to keep in mind in terms of those credits. For every credit that you receive in the semester system, for instance, that translates back into the quarter system, I think it's always really helpful, is you actually get 1.5 credits for every in the quarter system for every 1 credit in the semester system. So common class in the semester system is 3 credits. When you come back to the University of Oregon, it translates to 4.5 credits. Sometimes it gets rotated up to 5. So again, just being mindful of, like, for every 1 class that you get, you can get additional courses or credits coming back into the quarter system. In terms of additional support for funding, I think this is always really helpful. Again, most forms of financial aid do apply. So a lot of the Summit, the APEX scholarship does apply for study abroad as well, in addition to if you receive a Pell Grant from the FAFSA form, you'll also get additional support as well. We also have study abroad scholarships in our office. These are still up in the air in terms of amounts that are being awarded based on our founders and our donations that we currently have in our office. So just keep up to date with our office in terms of what scholarships are available based on need or merit-based. So again, trying to think about that as well. Then there's also national scholarships that are available for students. So one of the most common that we see is the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship. So on here we have, in the summer of 2018, we had up to 12 students. So University of Oregon was ranked the 11th in the nation for receiving the most scholarships for study abroad at the University of Oregon. We make sure to help guide you and make sure that your essay is competitive within the scholarship market. I always think that's really helpful in terms of communicating your value and experience for why you want to study abroad. Is really important in terms of making sure that you solidify some additional funding. A lot of times you won't get turned away, so always apply for scholarships, even if you're questioning whether or not you're fully eligible. Sometimes you might be the only person applying for that particular scholarship, and maybe they had multiple funding for that particular scholarship, but since you were the only one, you get the whole thing. And so again, those are different ways for you to kind of strategize and prioritize funding available for a study abroad experience in particular. So finding your fit. So who's eligible to study abroad? So typically, most students will study abroad sophomore, junior, or senior year. The reason why I think that's really important to kind of highlight is that application deadlines to study abroad are in advance. So you really need to be on it. You really need to prioritize what's going on. Think about what particular location that you might be interested in going on in terms of fitting study abroad in your schedule. Again, if you want to study abroad more than once, that's possible for you to do, but you need to plan in advance. So typically applications is kind of at the end here. Applications are anywhere between 3 months to a whole year in advance. And I say calendar year, not academic year. For instance, Japan requires an application deadline of January 1st for the next academic year. So if you were even planning on going sophomore year, this is really wild and really forefront of your mind. But if you're interested in even going to Japan in your sophomore year, you have to apply by January 1st of your freshman year. So again, this is where those things come into play as to why you see more students that are juniors studying abroad, because sometimes as freshmen it's hard to kind of get everything together and know exactly where you want to go or what kind of experience that you might want to have. So again, it doesn't matter what time fits for you. It's just learning about what are your barriers that you need to overcome in order to make this a reality for you. Some programs do have GPA or language requirements, and I do want to highlight that in particular. Those programs have those requirements for a reason for your success. So if there's a language requirement of 2 years of a particular language, just be mindful that We cannot deviate from that. Same with the GPA. If it requires a 3.0 or a 2.5 GPA, you need to have a 2.5, not a 2.49. So really being mindful of your academics, your GPA is always really helpful in terms of being successful on a study abroad experience. Another thing that's always helpful is housing opportunities and what's available for you. So there's homestay options where you basically have a family away from home. These can be a really cool opportunity. It's kind of like an Airbnb, but for longer. So that can be really helpful. You also learn about local cuisine, as well as dynamics of how a family operates. A lot of times they can even have kids or pets sometimes. Obviously those things are taken in consideration of placements of what you might be interested in, but sometimes if you have a dog like myself and you would miss them terribly, this is a really cool opportunity because you might be able to have a dog living with you. There are other options for resident halls nearby for a particular university, or even apartments where you're living with other international students, so essentially people that are not from that particular country. So say you're studying abroad in Germany, you might be housed with people that are not from Germany but from nearby countries. So again, those can be really cool opportunities for you to advance your network and your opportunities as well. So next steps to making this a reality and making sure that you, again, still graduate on time, or sometimes even early if that's your goal. This can be really helpful in terms of your trajectory. So make sure you get to know your academic advisor, whoever that happens to be on campus. Make sure that you go talk to somebody that you feel comfortable with and asking those questions to develop an academic plan to fit study abroad in. That way you make sure that you don't miss prerequisite courses in order to have an issue with credits on the way back. That's always something that you want to pay attention to. So make sure that you take your prerequisite courses at the University of Oregon, and then you can take additional courses abroad. Start budgeting yourself, figuring out a plan. A lot of students will get a summer job, for instance, to save up additional money because they know that they want to have souvenirs and a bunch of trinkets and eat out more often. So make sure that you're budgeting yourself and figure out what that actual cost is going to look like for you. Again, check out the budget page on each of our program pages on our website. Do your research. Find programs that you're interested in. Have those kind of pinpointed for yourself and make sure that you know when they're available. So some programs might only be offered in like fall semester or summer or a whole academic year, and so really paying attention to the programs that you're interested in and where they're offered, especially the application deadline. Make sure that you have that recorded for yourself as well, so you make sure that you stay on top of that. And then meet with a GEO advisor to handle those additional questions about what does that particular program look like, what's the housing available, what kind of experiences are going to be there. You can also, again, talk about your academics and how that's going to play into it. Can, again, be really helpful in terms of making sure that you make this a reality. So apply to your program. I think that's always a big step. A lot of people get really scared to hit that apply button. You're not financially obligated for anything until you actually put money down. So we do require a $50 application fee, and we do require, once you've been accepted to that program, because there is, especially for the programs that are competitive, we do have an interview process and so on, so we will accept you. There's not a whole bunch of issues that really come into play, but we just make sure to look out for red flags or particular issues for that particular program, making sure that the right student is on there. So again, just make sure that you apply to your program and pay the $50 is when you'll be a little bit more set up for success. And then apply for study abroad scholarships in particular. That can be, again, really helpful in terms of figuring out what program that you're interested in. There are some faculty or program-specific scholarships as well as the national ones. There's also critical language learning. So if you're learning something outside of Romance languages, for instance, there's additional funding and support for that as well, or even particular locations outside of Western Europe can also be financially affordable. So again, prioritizing what's the location. Are you more concerned about budget? Are you concerned about which academic program and which credits you're going to receive? All of those things are really helpful for you to make a list and prioritize them as to what's the most important thing for you, and then do it. Go abroad. I think that's always, again, something really helpful for students to partake in. So this is a way for you to connect with our office once you're here in the fall, hopefully, and reach us all year round. So we are still have staff working remotely currently, so you can still reach out by email at geoinfo@uoregon.edu, or you can always stop into 300 West Oregon Hall starting in the fall. You can visit our office, or you can call and set up an appointment as well. So again, those are options to again meet with a GEO advisor or talk with somebody in our office about scholarships even, can be an available piece for you. And always check out our social media. So our handle is at GEO Abroad. We do giveaways. We do hand out money. We give scholarships sometimes where you don't have to apply for an actual scholarship. We just give it away based on a competition. We do photo contests. And so that's a really great opportunity to, again, kind of experience from other students what they've been doing abroad and what their experiences looked like, similar to the videos that I've shared previously. So again, check out our any of our social media channels at GEO Abroad. And that's all I have for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla. And now, as promised, we have time for live Q&A. As you might have guessed, there's lots of questions that have come through from students. And so we'll go ahead and just get started with Nina Grace. She's wondering, do we have to apply during our freshman year if we would like to travel during our sophomore year? Or are there some programs that have a later application date?
Great question. So application deadlines, again, are probably more based on the particular program. So I just gave an example of Japan, for instance, that has a really early application deadline, specifically because it's an exchange program. So again, that balance for an international student to essentially swap places with you. So we need to know that information well in advance. For other programs, if you're interested, even in the summer between freshman and sophomore year, a lot of those application deadlines will happen still in February or March of your freshman year. So just really paying attention to like close to the end of winter quarter to right before spring break that you'll want to start getting your stuff in. Obviously, you want to prioritize doing your application because there are essays involved in that. So I think that's also really important to pay attention to, that you might not want to do it during finals week. So just, pay attention to what that looks like. But if you are interested in studying abroad in sophomore year, you are most likely going to have to apply by the end of your freshman year for sure.
Right, yeah. So basically, it sounds like planning ahead is a good way to go, right?
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, Nina Grace has another great question. Are there new programs offered every year? Is it something new every single year? You changing it up?
Absolutely. It's the name of the game for sure, is to offer different opportunities, different types of programs, as well as establishing new connections with the University of Oregon faculty members. Again, for those UO faculty-led programs, I think is really helpful. And sometimes just exploring different locations. So some programs might have the same academic topic, but maybe they've transitioned it to a different location. So that happens quite frequently. There are some staple programs that have been around for probably over 10, 15 years. So you won't see those probably going away, I would think, anytime soon, but there are new programs always coming online. So again, checking and researching, periodically when you have some downtime, look at some cool pictures, I think is always really helpful. So just always make sure that you're staying up to date on the programs that are available. And our online catalog has the most up-to-date information. If it's not available, it'll either be paused or it'll tell you on that particular program that it's not running that year, or so on and so forth. So just make sure that you're paying attention.
Nice. Awesome. Great question that just came up. Do students usually know people in their program before they actually arrive and study abroad?
Great question. I will say it depends on the program. We always do pre-departure orientation, so that is a requirement for studying abroad. So we facilitate, it's anywhere between it's roughly around 2 hours of a workshop that you go to, and that's a really great way for you to meet the individuals on your particular program prior to you departing. So we always encourage you to exchange contact information, maybe catch coffee, again, before you leave. Sometimes students will wait to purchase flights because they want to travel with somebody else rather than just by themselves. So that's a really great opportunity. There are some other programs, again, that more independence based. So exchanges, for instance, if it's a program where we only send maybe 1 to 3 University of Oregon students abroad, you're probably not going to meet them until you arrive. So just really being mindful of that. It really just depends. There's usually an on-site orientation as well once your program starts in country. They usually do it like the next day, so you're not so jet lagged and you actually know what's going on as well. So you can always pay attention to that, but there are ways for you to make connections before you do study abroad.
Awesome. That's so great to hear, because I'm sure that might be a concern for some students. It's kind of scary to go to a new place and not know anyone. So I love that GEO has that incorporated into the orientation experience, and students can kind of find some peers before they go.
Absolutely. And some students on some programs have actually created like Facebook groups. One of our programs for, I'm going to butcher the title of it, so I apologize. It's Indigenous Studies and Environmental Justice and in Bolivia with Derek Hendry is a University of Oregon faculty member, and that particular program created an actual student group on campus to support the initiatives of that particular location. So there's even options of student groups that get created from a study abroad experience that you can still interact with as well, and there's also international spots on campus. So the Mills International Center in the EMU is also a great base. They have travel books that you can rent out as well. They have international magazines and so on and so forth. So it's a really cool hangout spot in the EMU that's internationally focused.
Nice. The more and more I hear you talk, the more jealous I am that I am not a student and I don't get to study abroad. So I'm sure parents and family members out there listening are like, oh, dang, can I come too?
Yeah, that FOMO experience is very real from study abroad. Like I said, the time is definitely as an undergraduate student, because as soon as you graduate and leave, even if you go into a master's program, there's not as much financial support. So I think it's really helpful to remember that, because if you're interested in studying abroad or traveling, if you want somebody to financially pay for you to kind of make that way to happen as an undergraduate student, that is where it's going to be. Because once you graduate, it's as deep as your pockets are, and sometimes they're not as deep as we want them to be.
Right, so take advantage of it, right? Undergraduate students, you're listening, you're hearing Caleb, please take advantage of it while you can. I know a concern that maybe many parents and family members, as well as students, might have when they study abroad is healthcare. So can you talk a little bit more about the services related to healthcare that students will have when they study abroad?
Great question. So all of our programs, a part of the fee is actually we provide you international health insurance because not all United States healthcare providers offer international coverage. So we make sure that students are covered when they do go abroad. You never know what's going to happen in terms of those situations. We also have a 24/7 emergency phone. So we have a staff member constantly on call. It doesn't matter if you're in a different time zone, that will answer any of your questions that you have, or be able to access or help you find a translator at a hospital, for instance, or a particular hospital that's nearby to you if you have those types of issues. If you've lost your passport, that's another common one for travelers, not only just for study abroad, just in general. We typically misplace things, unfortunately. So helping you find a nearby embassy in order to get that situated all encompasses within the health and safety regulations that we provide University of Oregon students to make sure that you're safe. An example of that is also the support that we did for students that were studying abroad in spring quarter when the pandemic was really starting to take off and when certain countries started closing. We did make sure to get all of our students back into the United States, and we did refund students' programs and their fees so that they weren't financially obligated for any of those issues based on the unfortunate circumstances that took place. So I think that's just really helpful to kind of acknowledge that, again, even if you are planning to study abroad in the future, you will still be working with you about what those financial costs look like so that you're not completely out of pocket for something that you weren't able to experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. I appreciate that you and your team worked so hard for students this past spring to get them back home safely, and that there's so many precautions in place for the future as well, knowing that, that's reasonably so a common concern. So it's great to hear that. All right, here's another question for you. What are the benefits of doing an internship over more of a traditional classroom study abroad experience? Can you do both at the same time?
Great question. So it depends on the internship, I would say. So it depends on if that internship is already incorporated into the academic program. So you're doing a part-time part-time internship. So I think that can sometimes be afforded. You can sometimes even do an academic program, even again at our GEO centers, for instance. And if you're interested in doing a field study or an internship in particular, get professional experience, a lot of times our site directors can actually help you navigate that space or figure out some of the connections that they have. Again, because they're from and they live in that particular location year round, and so they know a lot of resources available. When you do that, that doesn't always guarantee that you'll get internship credit, though, into your academic program. So just being mindful of that. We don't guarantee what types of credits will come back because it's really at the mercy of your academic department and unit. So that's why it's really, really important to pay attention to your academic advisor in terms of what might be either pre-approved at that particular major or that department, or what is most likely going to be approved in those types of situations. If you do, for instance, we have Global Works internships, for instance, which are the ones that you get professional experience working 40 hours a week in a particular location. There is an intercultural communication course that's available with the internship component, so you can get up to 12 quarter credits doing a Global Works internship, but that doesn't always mean that you can if you're able to take additional courses on that, that's great. Not everyone has the time management to be able to kind of conducive that. So you do want to make sure that it's going to be something that you're able to manage and pay attention to, because your internship is really important and you can get fired. And so you want to make sure that you're getting your job done, and you want to make sure that you're doing it well. So if you're doing studies on top of that, there are options for you to do that. Just make sure that you're paying attention to your time, especially if you're doing some courses at the University of Oregon and an international internship. Time zones are key. So making sure that if it says it's a deadline, on August 21st at 11:59 p.m., but maybe it's in, Singapore, that's not going to be today, that's going to be yesterday. So just really pay attention to time zones and when projects are going to be due. I think that's going to be really important to stay organized and plan ahead, like I said.
Yeah, and students, as you're listening to this, hopefully this time management advice that Kayla is providing, you'll notice the importance of that across college, even when you're in the States and you're studying here domestically. Time management is so important as a college student, but even more so when you're abroad and maybe you're juggling an internship and you're in a new place. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. We do have time for probably one or two more questions. This one's kind of a tough one, but I think you're ready for it. So, are students studying abroad this year?
Great question. So our programs are not available for fall, given the current situation that's at play. In terms of in the future, we are anticipating allowing students to study abroad starting in January. So that is something that we are interested in. But again, the name of the game of this pandemic, everything is fluid. And so we stay on top of it for students. But again, those application deadlines don't move too much. So still making sure that you get your application materials in case things don't go right. So that's just some things to keep in mind, because if, for instance, you paid that $50 application fee and the program, for instance, doesn't go, we will refund you that back. But again, you can't go if you didn't apply. So you have to kind of balance that out a little bit. So we are anticipating being able to send students abroad even this academic year. But again, everything is up in the air. It's definitely stipulated by immigration. Definitely going to have to keep an eye on that as well, not only for international student and scholars coming into the United States and coming to the University of Oregon, but also the opposite of where are Americans allowed to go in other countries. So really keeping an eye on that. The other piece of this as well is the quarantining process. So a lot of countries, if you are able to travel international, are still requiring, at least currently, a 14-day quarantine mandatory that is financially responsible for the individual that's traveling. So our program probably won't most likely cover that. So that's just something, again, for the budget to kind of keep in mind during this time. Hopefully in the 21-22 academic year, this will all kind of subsided. And we'll kind of have a better game plan, but we are still anticipating to be able to send students.
That's fantastic news, and I appreciate you all and your team being flexible and kind of in waiting and students waiting to hear and knowing that things might change, but that's kind of our new reality. So going with the flow and kind of sticking with the social media and all the ways to stay in touch with you all to see if there are any updates along the way, which I think is a perfect way to end. If students want to, I know you mentioned your contact information, but if students wanted to get in touch with your office before classes start, can you just remind us the best way to do that?
Yeah, so there's multiple different ways that you can navigate that. You can go to geo.uoregon.edu, so geo.uoregon.edu, or you can send an email even already, and it will get to the right person depending on your question that you might have. So if you email geoinfo, so geoinfo at uoregon.edu, we'll still be able to answer your questions. Again, we have our staff available working remotely and answering all of your questions, still setting up Zoom or phone call meetings with students individually, so you can still ask those questions even before you arrive on campus.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla.
Thank you.
We are going to wrap up now, but just have a couple things to mention before you leave. So students, if you're watching, please don't forget to complete your reflection for today's interest session by logging into community.uoregon.edu. And if you have any questions about introduction whatsoever, please check out our website at orientation.uoregon.edu. You can contact us by email at orientation@uoregon.edu. You can also text us at 541-346-1159. You can also listen to our weekly Flock Talk podcast for more information from myself and Cora on weekly updates, as well as kind of a deep dive from some other folks across campus talking about various kind of hot topics. Last but not least, students, please check your @uoregon email every single day. We have some important updates for you coming through that email, things about academic advising and other really important next steps that you're going to need to complete before you start in the fall. So if anything you do at the end of the day today, check that email. As always, go Ducks.